Let's bring in our political panel. Kayleigh McGee-White, Restoring America editor, for the Washington Examiner, and former Democratic New York State Senator David Carlucci. Welcome to you both. Thanks for coming on this Labor Day. Kayleigh, let me start with you. We just watched the first Republican debate here on Fox, and I'm wondering if President Trump doesn't get the nomination, do you think the rest of the pack looks weak? You got a former VP, a former United Nations secretary, a popular governor from Florida, but could someone like Larry Hogan look at that group and say, hey, I'm a stronger candidate?
You know, if you look at polls of support for Trump right now, it just seems like this is inevitable that he will win the nomination. You had one recent poll that found that 70% of Republican voters said they would back Trump for the primary. And that support doesn't go away even if Larry Hogan were to mount a bid for a third party. Trump, I do not think, is necessarily weak to a third-party challenge. It's Joe Biden who is particularly weak to a third-party challenge from someone like Larry Hogan or maybe even Joe Manchin, who has also been touted as a potential option for the no labels group. So this is a concern primarily for Democrats, not necessarily for Republicans right now.
Okay, so what about that, David? Concern mostly for Democrats. So same question to you on the Democratic side. This group, No Labels, says it will only put forward a candidate if both sides look weak. So how does President Biden look?
Yeah, well, I don't see how No Labels could be anything but a spoiler. And the question is, will it be a spoiler for the Republicans or the Democrats? And I think that's yet to be seen. It'll be who's the candidate that they put up. They keep mentioning these polls where they have a generic candidate doing well. Well, you can poll a generic candidate, but you can't vote for a generic candidate. Once you put a face on that generic name, you have a name, you have someone that's actually has a record, they have their pros and their cons. So in this political environment, those cons will really be weighed heavily. So I think it's a question about who that candidate is. Look, Larry Hogan is not an exciting candidate. Joe Manchin is not really an exciting candidate. I don't see them getting more than 1 or 2% of the vote, but that could be enough to swing the election depending on what state it's in. We know polls are showing Biden and Trump neck and neck. If that continues, any deviant from this election, from either Biden or Trump, could mean the spoiler goes in that direction.
Yeah, well, speaking of the polls, let's go ahead and put up a poll here. This is the head-to-head matchup between President Trump and President Biden. It's a dead heat. So if you have a third-party candidate in there and President Biden starts to struggle in the polls, I mean, a lot of people point to the fact that he forgets people's names. Sometimes he looks confused on stage. Is that enough to make someone like Larry Hogan or Joe Manchin look a little bit more attractive? And Kayleigh, let me go to you first on that.
Well, No Label sees a path to victory because so many polls show that the American voters are fed up with both Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Basically, everyone who was polled said that they don't want to support either candidate. And one recent poll found that 47% of Americans said that they would consider supporting a third-party bid. And this one recent AP poll, when voters were asked to describe what they thought of the two leading candidates, they called Biden old and they called Donald Trump corrupt. So is this the best that we can do? Are these really the only options that we're going to give voters? Many independents, many swing voters are saying, you know what, we might take a look at a different candidate.
Okay. David, I want to put up another poll, and then I'll go to you first. This is the poll showing the enormous lead that the former president has against the other primary candidates. There doesn't seem to be any weakness there. When you look at that poll, is there any doubt in your mind that he's going to be the Republican nominee?
No, I think polling tells us, look, Trump is far, far ahead. Now, this is a generic, nationwide poll. It doesn't show how he's doing in Iowa or New Hampshire. But unless there's something that happens, it looks like Trump is going forward, looks like Biden's going forward. But of course, we're a few months out from Iowa, from New Hampshire, so anything can happen.
Yeah.
But
and
I
just
think
a quick,
that
go ahead. Oh, go ahead and finish.
I was going to say, these candidates have been through the ringer, right? Donald Trump, we know, his pros and cons. Joe Biden, we know his pros and cons. And yet the American public is still split between the two of them. So I don't see how much more you're going to pull away from either of those candidates. I think their base support is very strong. And it means that any deviation, 1% here, 1% on the other side, could mean a spoiler effect. And that will really dictate in terms of who that candidate is. Biden is very strong in his base, and Trump is very strong in his base. The fight is for the middle, but I don't know who left is independent anymore.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll have to see.
I think only a few votes out.
We'll have to see what happens with this no labels, and if they're serious, if they put a candidate forward, we'll certainly be watching it. In the meantime, thank you both today for coming, Kaylee McGee-White and David Carlucci.